Sega challenges you with the ultimate video game. The Sega Master System, with twice as much memory
Dad?
as any other video game. Advanced video technology like scrolling backgrounds, graphics in 64 colors, digital sounds, and light phasers.
Fresh!
And you can add to the excitement with sports pads, control sticks, and the first video games ever in 3D.
Sega's the one.
The Sega Master System. The challenge will always be there.
Hey everybody, it's me, Cyrus, back again with another video. Welcome to Cyrus Martin Likes Weird, Obscure Consoles that other people don't like. That's pretty much what I do on this channel, right? You might hear Jon Snow in the background. He is hovering around right now trying to figure out what is going on. Sorry about that. Anyway, the show must go on, John. The show must go on. So this is the Sega Master System and the Sega Master System 2. The Sega Master System is one of those weird consoles that a lot of people in the United States did not have a whole lot of exposure to or opportunity to even know much about. Whenever this thing was in its heyday, I had an NES and an Atari 2600. I think we had even moved past Intellivision at that point, but I definitely did not have a Master System. But I would see commercials for the Master System on Saturday morning cartoons. They had really cool commercials. There was this announcer who would go through the list of different Master System games, and they had like the 3D glasses and just a lot of really cool stuff. It looked great, and I was very familiar with Sega arcade games. And the Master System seemed to be the place to be if you wanted those Sega arcade games. But I'm from a pretty small town, and there was no place locally that sold the Master System or rented Master System games. Nothing. Nobody knew what the hell this thing was. They knew about Nintendo, they knew about Atari, and that was pretty much it. So I didn't have a Master System until it was pretty much already done with and over with. I picked one up later. But I would see this thing all the time, and I was fascinated with it. I would see it in the Sears catalog. I would see it on TV commercials. I would see it in game magazines. And people seemed to talk about it with pretty good, they would say good things about it. And the pictures that I saw of the games and the video that I saw on those commercials really captivated my attention and interest. But like I said, I was late to this party. So eventually, when I was in junior high, and this is probably about 1990, they relaunched the Master System as the Master System 2. And their old school original Master System was really cheap. And I picked one up then and discovered games like Phantasy Star, which blew my mind. Two-player Double Dragon, Rampage, Rostan. There's so many games that I was just like, oh wow, this is amazing. I fell in love with the console. The system was just amazing to me. It was the graphics were really good. The sound wasn't as good as the Nintendo. I will concede to that. There's a few games on the Master System that have really good music and sound. And if you're in Japan, you have some opportunities for even better sound. But back in those days, I didn't have those opportunities. We didn't have the FM synthesis unit. So it was just the regular sound, and most of that wasn't that great. But the graphics were really good. And pretty mind-blowing. Because by that time, I had already played the Genesis. I had already played the TurboGrafx. So when I finally did pick up the Master System, it was like, wow, I missed out on something. Because, like I said, the graphics, the colors, everything was just really impressive for an 8-bit system. And the Master System offered some very interesting things. A lot of people will say really bad things about the D-pad, the standard D-pad. There are a couple of variants of what this looks like. Some of them have like a little screw-in joystick that you can put in the middle, and some of them don't. And a lot of people don't really like this D-pad because it's kind of mushy. But I don't really have problems with it. I'm used to it. And there are some Master System games that you're going to need to play with a real Master System controller. You can use a Genesis controller on a Master System, and it works for 99.9% of the games, but there's a few that need this. Or you could use something like this. Although, as cool as this joystick looks, or looked to me back in the day anyway, it's not easy to use. It's not the most functional joystick. It's still cool to have it and to tinker around with it once in a while, but it's just not as cool as I had hoped it would be. The light gun, the light phaser for the Master System is really cool looking, and it's actually extremely accurate for light guns, for CRT light guns. But I will say there's one downside to it, which I've noticed as I've played more and more light gun games. Your TV needs to be bright. It needs to be set a little brighter than what you might normally want it to be. For some reason, this light phaser doesn't pick up light as well as like the NES Zapper. So kind of ironic, it's the light phaser. But anyway, they also came out with some really cool add-ons like the 3D glasses, if you've never seen those. And that does exactly what you think it would do. It gives you 3D for certain games. There's only a handful of games that offer 3D, but they do, and they do look really good. This plugs in here into the card slot for the Master System. Let me see if I can get it in there. Like that. And then you plug your headphones into that right there. And then you have 3D. The only problem is, again, you're going to have some issues with the TV because the glasses will reduce the light that you can see, so your picture will look a little bit dark. So again, you probably want to increase the brightness on your screen, and your frame rate will be a little bit lower than what you're used to. It cuts the frame rate in half. But for the games that work, it does do a pretty impressive 3D effect on a CRT TV. It does not work on a modern TV, obviously, but it's pretty cool. This is that Master System 2 I was telling you about. It's a redesign. A lot of people call this the toaster because, you know, it looks like a toaster. It's pretty simple. They took out the slot for the card games and for the 3D glasses, so you can't use that. But it's got this nice dust protector right here, which I think is actually really cool. The only real downside of this, other than not having the slot, is you only get RF out on this. You don't have any other video options. And with the regular Master System, you can output pretty much, I mean, you can output RF, composite, and RGB. You can do RGB video. So you can get a really, really good picture out of that. The games mostly came on cartridges, although there were some games on the cards. I have a cheap knockoff EverDrive in mine right now, and so you can play pretty much any Master System game on there. The Game Gear could actually play all the Master System games if you have the adapter for your Game Gear. And just to show you what that looks like, here's the Sega Game Gear, and you take your cartridge out of the back. You have this adapter that you can then plug in. There's a couple of different versions of this adapter that were made, and it just plugs right in like that into the Game Gear. And then you take your Master System cart, you just plug it straight into that. And it actually does work. You can play Master System games on your Game Gear. Unfortunately, you can't play Game Gear games on the Master System, but you do have that functionality. There's also an adapter for the Sega Genesis that will let you play Master System games on your Sega Genesis. But I will tell you this, if you have a 32X hooked up to your Genesis, then that adapter doesn't work. And if you have an EverDrive for your Genesis, you can run Master System ROMs on it, on your Genesis, unless you have the 32X adapter hooked up, in which case you got to take it out. But that's kind of an overview of the hardware. I think this console looks really cool. It's got some sort of convoluted little design elements to it. But I like it. I always thought it looked really awesome. It kind of looks like a stealth fighter jet or something. I don't know. It's very 80s, you know. Really cool looking system and really awesome games. So let's take a look at some of my favorite Sega Master System games, and we'll go from there. Now hang on just a second here. The first game that I experienced on my Sega Master System when I first fired it up was, hang on, this is the screen that I saw. The Sega logo comes up. It does its little animation, which I've always thought was cool as hell. And then this game, or these two games actually, were built into my Sega Master System. The first Master System that I bought, I didn't get a light gun with. I just got the Master System. I bought it used, and I didn't have the light gun. So I was never able to play Safari Hunt because I just never got that light gun for the first Master System I had. But I was able to enjoy Hang On quite a bit, and it's a game that I have played a lot over the years. Hang On is a racing game. It's based on the arcade racing game of the same name, Hang On. It's a motorcycle racing game. And it plays very similar to a lot of other racing games that came out around this time, like Pole Position or Outrun. This was before Outrun, but it's one of those style of games, of racing games. This is a game that you could sit down on a motorcycle at the arcade. They had like a full motorcycle you could sit on and play this. Really cool game. And the translation to the Master System graphically is obviously going to take a hit, but the gameplay is there. It's definitely there. And as far as graphics go, no, it's not going to compete with what the arcade had to offer. But as far as what was available on home consoles at the time, Hang On does a great job of giving you that sense of speed and recklessness on the motorcycle. The graphics are really colorful. This was actually a really good way to introduce you to what the Master System had to offer, because it just could do colors in a way that I had never seen an 8-bit system do. This was designed to compete with the NES in America, and to a lesser extent the Atari 7800. So I think when you look at a game like Hang On as a pack-in title, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously later this would go on to change, and they would include different games with the Master System. There was different options for that. In fact, the original release of the Power Base, the Master System Power Base, didn't actually have a game built into it. But this was built into the one that I got, and I spent a lot of time playing it. And like I said, I just really love this game. I think it's really fun, and it looks really cool. And the explosion, like when you blow up, when you make a mistake, which is really easy to do, the explosion looked fantastic. Explosions were hard to make look cool back in those days. For some reason, a lot of the home versions of racing games, when they would do like an explosion when you would run into something, like Pole Position, it looked great in the arcade, but like the home versions just had some trouble. This one actually looked really cool, so you didn't mind as much when you screwed up. Just a really great game and a lot of fun. But there were so many other amazing Master System games that really captivated your attention. So many great racing games too, including the one we just talked about, Outrun. So Outrun is a classic, amazing racing game that has had a lot of different versions. There's actually a lot of different versions of Outrun even on the Master System, believe it or not. But this classic version of Outrun, this is obviously not, again, going to really compete with what the arcade had to offer. But for home racing games back in those days, this was really cool. And it did capture the aesthetic of the arcade, the gameplay of the arcade. And it was just really awesome to be able to play Outrun, this really cool arcade game, at your house on a Sega console. You know, in those days, the arcade was the place where everything was like at the bleeding edge of technology for video games. The arcade was where you went to see the latest and greatest, most powerful hardware, most intriguing video game experiences, just the biggest, you know, that was available. The arcade was like the movie theater for like new releases, for big, you know, blockbusters and things like that. The arcade was where you went to play the new best stuff. The home console market was the home video market. You know, the home console market was where things went later, and maybe they weren't quite as good, but if you could get close to that, if you could have something really awesome at your house that gave you sort of a facsimile of what was available in the arcade, then that was just amazing. So Outrun on the Sega Master System was sort of amazing. And there was, like I said, plenty of other versions of Outrun that were released, including a 3D version with the 3D glasses, and some sequels and things like that. So there was a lot there. There was so many arcade games that were just amazing hits for Sega, and having their own console gave them this ability to put these out for your home and put them out in full color without compromising the color palette too much, and trying to offer as much as they could. Because the Master System had a CPU in it. It was a Z80 or Z80, as they like to say in other countries. The Z80 was twice as powerful as what the NES had in its capability. The color palette was considerably higher. The Master System was just a very capable system, technically speaking. Now, the NES could be supplemented with additional coprocessor chips, the MMC chips, which, you know, that would eventually mean that the NES could do some stuff that was really, really impressive. And as far as the sound goes, this is what I said before. I think that the NES definitely had better sound. But not to say you couldn't do great music on the Master System, it definitely had that capability. But for these arcade games, the Master System was really cool. I can remember the first time that I played Afterburner at the arcade, and I had never seen anything like it. The closest thing I had seen to it was probably Outrun, and Afterburner was Outrun in the sky. And back then, Top Gun was super popular. I guess it's been pretty popular again since there's a new Top Gun that's come out fairly recently. But back then it was a big deal. Fighter jets and there was so many movies that were coming out that were trying to copy Top Gun. And Afterburner really captured the imagination of a lot of us kids, as far as that speed and dogfighting in the air and taking out bogeys, you know, all that kind of stuff. My brother and my cousin really got into model airplanes around this time, and they built so many fighter jets and stealth fighters and so many really awesome models, and it was just a really popular thing. Aviation and in general was just really popular with our age group and with us in particular. So Afterburner was just a badass game, and playing this on the Master System was great. Of course, yeah, you know, technically it doesn't live up to the arcade, but it lives up to it in a lot of ways, and it's just a really great version. There was other ports of Afterburner, like on the NES. Other things had it too, but I think the Master System version of Afterburner was great. For what it had, for what it could offer. And this was, you know, again, before we had the Genesis and before we had consoles that had built-in scaling capabilities and things like that. So, yeah, Afterburner's really cool. Just another great arcade experience brought home. As far as mascots go, before Sega had Sonic the Hedgehog, they had really tried to capitalize on Alex Kidd, and there were several games released for the Alex Kidd franchise on the Master System and then later on the Sega Genesis. This particular character was pretty popular in a lot of countries, just it never really took off in the United States. But Alex Kidd in Miracle World was the game that was packed in with the Sega Master System 2. And I think most people kind of look back on that game as sort of the baseline for your Alex Kidd experience. Not to say that it was the best Alex Kidd game or the best platforming game on the Master System, because there's a lot of them. But it definitely was a game that a lot of people that had this console enjoyed and played. This is a game, this is an evolution of that, of Alex Kidd. This is a game that came out much, much later, and a lot of people regard Alex Kidd in Shinobi World as probably the best of the Alex Kidd games. There are several though, and different people have different opinions. But this game actually combines some of the best elements of Alex Kidd with some of the best elements of Shinobi, which is another super popular game on the Master System and another great conversion of the arcade experience. Yeah, Shinobi is just a really fun ninja game. The NES had Ninja Gaiden, and Sega had Shinobi. And Shinobi in the arcade was really cool. Shinobi on the Master System, I think, is just as good. I think this is probably one of the best, if not the best, of the arcade conversions on the Master System. It just does a really great job of recreating the arcade experience for the home console, for what it could do, for the technology available. It gives you the same gameplay. It gives you really, really good graphics for the time. It's just really fun. It's just a really great ninja game, and definitely one of the best purchases I made when I picked up my Master System for the first time, because I actually didn't have a lot of experience with Shinobi in the arcade. I had a lot of experience with Ninja Gaiden on the NES, but Shinobi was kind of new to me. But I had heard about it, and I was curious about it, so I did pick up Shinobi. I bought it used from one of those used game retailers that used to advertise in the back of the game magazines. It was either Play It Again or Funko or one of those. But yeah, I got a bunch of Master System games really cheap because I bought them after the console had sort of run its course in America. And I got them all used. So yeah, but Shinobi was definitely one of my favorites as far as arcade conversions were concerned. I thought this was just fantastic. Just really good graphics. There's like these special sequences, these bonus stages that will play, and the graphics in those bonus stages were, they're, you know, kind of mind-blowing for an 8-bit console. Like this is a console that could do some stuff that I was really shocked that an 8-bit system could do. And this was one of the experiences of that, was seeing like the bonus stage. Let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, this is what I'm talking about. This is the bonus stage. When these ninjas get really close to you, they just look cool as hell. Pretty awesome, even if I suck at it. But talk about some awesome graphics. There's some great examples of that on the Master System. So there's plenty of other awesome games, and we're talking about Ninja Gaiden on the NES. And yes, the Master System did get its own version of Ninja Gaiden. This game was released after Ninja Gaiden 3 was released on the NES. So this is a really late release to the Master System. And it never made its way to the United States. As far as music goes, this doesn't hold a candle to what the NES Ninja Gaiden games have to offer. Those games are well known for having just really great soundtracks. So music, again, it kind of suffers here on the Master System. But graphically, I think this game is just fantastic. It looks great. It looks like the NES Ninja Gaidens with just more colors. So it's graphically actually really impressive to look at. And it's really fun. It holds up very well in that series. It doesn't really connect story-wise to the series on the NES. So it's sort of its own thing. But it's really cool to be able to play Ninja Gaiden on the Sega Master System and have that experience be something somewhat similar to what you would have expected if you had played the NES games and were really familiar with that as far as what the series had to offer. So yeah, ninjas were super popular in the 80s. Like there was so many ninja movies, you know, so many different versions of that, from, you know, just like straight up ninja revenge movies to the Ninja Turtles. And the Ninja Gaiden series is just a classic legendary series in the video game world. And it's brought here to the Sega Master System. I think it's really cool. I'll actually play a little bit of this so you can hear the music, because it's actually not bad music. It's actually pretty good music. It's hard to compete with the NES, you know, as far as music goes. But here we go. That's really nice, like cinematics. You know, the graphics are, again, really colorful and detailed for the Master System. Of course, the NES version is well known for having great cinematics as well. I'm just gonna skip past this right here. Oh boy, that's not good. Come on. There we go. Oh. Oh. There we go. I am extremely rusty. There we go. Crap. Come on. There we go. Oh, jumped right off. Anyway, you can tell, I mean, the graphics here are really colorful. There's a lot of really nice detail. It's pretty cool. The music isn't bad, it's just when you're expecting Ninja Gaiden music, it's not really gonna live up to what the NES could do. A lot of cheap enemy stuff that happens in this game. Wow, see what I'm talking about? Still worth playing though. And how many versions over the years of R-Type have there been, and how many games have taken inspiration from this series? Just a legendary classic shoot 'em up. And on the Sega Master System, R-Type was just really fantastic. It was something sort of amazing at the time. This is one of those games that I kept seeing in commercials or in advertisements, in pictures in magazines or in catalogs. And this is one of the reasons that you bought a Sega Master System, because R-Type was not on the Nintendo Entertainment System. R-Type was on the Master System, and it looked fantastic. And I love shoot 'em ups. I've always loved spaceship shooters. And I loved R-Type. I had played this at the arcade, and me and my brother both loved this game. So it was always sort of in the back of my mind when I had thought about getting a Master System, because, yeah, it was just great to be able to play this on the Master System when I finally was able to. Yeah, there's plenty of great shooters on the NES and on other consoles, absolutely. But you always want to play the real thing, and we had played this in the arcade and loved it. And to see this running on the Master System was just fantastic. No, it's not the same as the arcade as far as graphics and sound and gameplay. It's a toned down version for sure, but it still looks great, and for the time and for the technology, I think it's a fantastic arcade port and a really fun way to play R-Type. I think there's obviously better ways to play the game now, better translations and versions of R-Type that have been released, but there's still some charm in going back to this on the Master System for sure. So one of the games that always blew me away at the arcade when I was able to play it was Rostan. And the concept of having this on a home console was just too enticing. This, Phantasy Star, and a couple of other games that's the reason I bought a Master System. Just to be able to play these games on this console. Now, Rostan on the Master System, it's not going to compete with the arcade. Again, this is sort of a theme that we keep repeating, but this is an 8-bit system that it just was not capable of doing what the arcade was able to do. But as far as gameplay is concerned, as far as the overall feeling of the arcade game, the aesthetic, I think Rostan for the Sega Master System is definitely gets the job done. It's a super fun version of the game. It actually does play a little different than the arcade, but not so different that it's not recognizable. And in some ways, it's kind of better. They make it a little bit easier. The arcade version is pretty hard, but you get to do all the cool things you wanted to do that Rostan does in the arcade with his sword, and you get to look super cool doing it, because that was one of the great things about Rostan that we used to love, was just the way the character looked. You know, he looked super cool, the way he holds his weapon and walks around and swings his sword and axe and different weapons. The jumping mechanic. There's one thing that's benefit: you don't die when you hit the water. It's a little bit easier than the arcade version. But it has all the cool looking enemies too. Yeah, graphically they're not as detailed and things like that. But looky here, you still get the fire sword. Yeah, it still has the elements that you would want, that you would hope would be in the home version. Just a really cool way to play a great arcade game. And yeah, an abbreviated, simplified, easier version of that. But really cool. And the music, although simplistic, is great. I actually really like the music in this game. It's not nearly as amazing as the arcade music by any stretch of the imagination, but for the Master System, I think it's nice. I have put so many hours in this game, and by the way, if you still find the game to be a little too difficult, don't worry. There is a cheat code that you can put in that will make you invincible. There's a way to get through this game and cheat and see the ending if that's really all you're trying to do. Just beat the game, just blow through it, beat the game, and experience the ending. Let's see if I can down thrust on this guy. There we go. So yeah, Rostan is definitely one of my favorite Sega Master System games, for sure. So back in the 80s, I have to admit that I was kind of obsessed with Double Dragon. There hadn't been a whole lot of this type of game made, and this was a 2-player side-scrolling beat-em-up game. This was before Streets of Rage, before Final Fight, before a lot of the games that we sort of look to as like touchstones for what a side-scrolling beat-em-up is supposed to be. You know, there were no Ninja Turtle beat-em-ups, there was none of that. This was very early in the life of side-scrolling beat-em-up games. Double Dragon is a little slow. If you've ever played the arcade version of it, it is a little bit slow, a little bit clunky too. But again, this is very old and early in that lineage of games. And when Double Dragon was released in the arcade, me and my brother would play the ever-living crap out of it. I don't know how many quarters we put into Double Dragon, and we really desperately wanted a home version of Double Dragon. They finally announced Double Dragon was coming to the Nintendo Entertainment System, and we were so excited about it. And when we finally were able to play Double Dragon on the NES, we were disappointed, because it was not 2-player simultaneous. There was a mode where you could fight each other 2-player, but there was no, cooperative side-scrolling beat-em-up like the arcade had. That was really disappointing to us. Now, in hindsight, and since then, obviously I've developed an enormous affection for the NES version of Double Dragon. I think it's actually really fun and really cool. It has amazing music. I just really love that version. There's some elements that they included in the NES version of Double Dragon that are very specific to that are not in any other version of Double Dragon, that I think makes that a very unique and really cool experience. So I love Double Dragon on the NES. But back then, I was pissed. I was not happy about Double Dragon not being 2-player. I mean, I can remember my outrage of like screaming, how can you call it Double Dragon when it's not 2-player? It's not Double Dragon. I was like, they should call it Single Dragon. I was pretty mad about that. But we really wanted this game, and we had an Apple computer back then, and I would see that it was available on IBM computer, but it wasn't on Apple computer. And I was so pissed because we just couldn't get this at home. Eventually I did get my Master System, and I picked up Double Dragon and was very pleasantly surprised to see it had full 2-player simultaneous gameplay. And the game actually moves really fast. It's not as slow and clunky as the arcade version. So it's actually got a little bit more speed with 2-player simultaneous gameplay. The music, again, is not as good as the NES version music by any stretch of the imagination. And the graphics, I think you might argue, even though there is more color, and there's more going on screen here with this version, you could argue that the graphics on the NES version probably look better. But I think these graphics are actually really good, really serviceable. If you compare this version to like the Atari 7800 version, or God forbid the Atari 2600 version, then it murders those. Absolutely. But yeah, I will concede that the NES version probably looks better than this. But this is 2-player, and there's a hell of a lot to be said for 2-player Double Dragon. And I think if you wanted to experience a really fun 2-player beat 'em up on the Sega Master System, I think you could do a lot worse than playing Double Dragon, because it's actually really cool. And speaking of really amazing 2-player simultaneous arcade conversions, Rampage on the Master System absolutely destroys every other version of this for the 8-bit systems. And there's really no competition in this regard. So I own Rampage for the Atari 7800, and I've obviously owned it for the NES. I can tell you, if you're even mildly objective, if you're even like remotely capable of objectivity at all, which is difficult to do and a tough ask for people in the retro community, and I am including myself in that, by the way. I think if you're objective at all, you have to say that Rampage on the Sega Master System is absolutely the best version of any 8-bit version of Rampage. It's just phenomenal. Graphically, it looks the best by far. The animations, the details, the colors, it's just on another level. The music is actually really good in this game. I like it a lot. And it is 2-player simultaneous. It's just great. Rampage on the Master System. If you want to play this game, I mean, you can play the arcade version, or you can play the Master System version, and you're going to have fun either way. And I don't think there's much else to say about that. So yes, the arcade conversions on the Master System are absolutely great. Now there are some issues with some of them, but overall I think the arcade conversions are very good. There's also a ton of really amazing original titles and games that that you can experience on the Master System that you really can't play anywhere else, that really just look great and are just a really fun experience that you can only get on the Master System. And Considine is one of those games that I would fit into that category. Just a really cool original single player game. There's several games that I used to see in ads and I would think about playing, and I didn't know what that experience would be like, because I really had no frame of reference, because it's, you know, not on other things. But when I finally was able to get the chance to play some of these games, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to experience some of these exclusive single player titles and see what they had to offer. This game looks great. It has really, you know, really fun gameplay. It's one of those like adventure side-scrolling kind of games that offers a lot to it, and it's just really fun. There's several of these types of games. Yeah, Lord of the Sword is another great game with actually really nice music and really cool graphics. This game has a lot in common with games like Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. It's just a lot of fun. It's got a lot in common with a lot of the side-scrolling slash type games and adventure type games. Graphically, I think it just looks fantastic. The gameplay is really solid, and there's a lot of fun to be had with Lord of the Sword. This is one of those games that if you get a Master System, you really should give this game a shot. It's challenging. It's not easy, but there's a lot of really great gameplay here. And if you're looking for adventure, then I think you really have to try the Wonder Boy games on the Master System. Probably the best of these is Dragon's Trap, Wonder Boy 3. This is a fantastic adventure game where you can explore and discover all kinds of things. It's just a great game. There's been so many other games that have taken inspiration from this series, and the Master System versions still hold up really well. There's a lot of like retro style games that are being released today that have basically emulated this game specifically. I played through a game called Agalos on my PlayStation not too long ago, and there's so much from Agalos that was taken directly from this game. Took an inspiration from this game, and that's the case with a ton of these like modern adventure type games. There are other versions of this that you can play on other consoles and things like that. But if you wanted to play the Master System version, if you're curious about it, yeah, definitely check this out. It's really fun. It's a really great experience on this console. And like I said, I think this is probably the best of the Wonder Boy games on here. Last year I did a full playthrough of Golvelius, and I got to tell you, man, this is another one of those all-time classic, great Sega Master System adventure games. And I thoroughly enjoyed playing through this game. It is really hard at first. When you first start playing Golvelius, it's not easy. There's a big learning curve and difficulty curve to get past. But once you get past that, it's great. This game is fantastic. And I played all the way through it, had a really great time doing it. And I definitely recommend it. Also, this is another one of those games, like Wonder Boy, that has inspired a lot of modern adventure games that are being released, retro-styled adventure games and things like that. It's just, it's a big deal as far as like this genre is concerned. And again, specifically talking about Agalos, there's some stuff that's straight out of this game, like straight out of it. You will have a great time playing this game if you're willing to put in a little bit of time, and if you're willing to deal with a little bit of early frustration. It'll definitely pay off later, because I love this game. I had a great time playing through this, and I recommend it. Play just a little bit here. I love the music in this game. Yeah, you have like side-scrolling and overhead view stuff in this game. There's quite a bit to this game. It seems like it's not, but the more you play it, you start realizing how much is really going on here. And Golvelius is just fantastic. Ah, pretty tough game, but awesome. So the Sega Master System did not have Castlevania, but it did have Master of Darkness. Assuming you lived in Europe. This was not released in the United States. But if you buy the cartridge, you can play it on your American Sega Master System, and it plays perfectly. I actually had the cartridge for this for a couple of years. I bought this and played it on my Master System. It's actually a really fun game. I don't think it's quite as good as Castlevania. The music is definitely not as good. But if you're looking for that type of game, that sort of fix, and you want it on the Master System, this is pretty good. It's got that same type of atmosphere. You're, fighting monsters and vampires and different creatures from, the lore of history and things like that. So it's got that same sort of Castlevania vibe. It doesn't really play that much like Castlevania. It plays a little bit differently than that. But it does have kind of some similarities, like I said, in some ways. And I think it's really fun. It's pretty cool. It has good music, too, for the Master System, and good graphics. Boo. I was hoping the game would start up a demo here. I guess it's not going to. That's okay. I'll show you some gameplay. We'll skip through this. So yeah, you can see, I mean, graphically this is not Castlevania. Musically it's not Castlevania, but it's still pretty cool. You know, if you're into the Castlevania type of games, there's another game you should try. It's a homebrew game. It's a game that was released on the internet not too long ago, actually. And sometimes a homebrew game might not be that impressive. Sometimes it might be a little bit better. But there's a game that is very similar to Castlevania. I think actually borrow some direct inspiration, maybe even some assets from Castlevania that you can play on your Sega Master System. And I think you should give it a shot if you're interested. Now, this game is very hard. This is not an easy game. But if you can overcome the learning curve, Silver Valley is absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best homebrew games that I've played for any console, and I find it to be really impressive. Music is good, the graphics are good, gameplay, everything. So, yeah, if you like Castlevania, here's a game you should probably try, because this is like a really cool rendition of Castlevania, basically, although it's not Castlevania, for the Sega Master System. It's a lot closer than Master of Darkness is, which I love that game too. But yeah, you got to check out Silver Valley. Yeah, it's pretty hard. It's awesome, though. I will literally be here all day trying to show you Master System games that I love, because I love this console. I adore this console. There's so many games on this that just blew me away. that have stayed with me throughout the years. The experience that I had, just the amazing things that I love about what the Master System has to offer. And one of my all-time favorite games is Phantasy Star. And Phantasy Star is definitely the most impressive game that I've ever seen on an 8-bit console, and completely just blew me away when I first played this on my Master System. I've told the story before about firing this game up for the first time and having to run into the other room to grab my brother to get him to come take a look at this, because I literally could not believe that this was possible on an 8-bit system, to see a game that looks, and yeah, this right here doesn't look that impressive, but yeah, the things you can do in Phantasy Star, this type of effect right here, there had been attempts made to do something similar to this on the NES, and those attempts had not been very successful. Nothing like this had ever, there had never been anything that looked like this on an 8-bit system. I actually had never seen anything like this on a 16-bit system. I was very impressed. The battles that you get into, the animations that you have in this game, the music, and if you play this in Japan, you do have the possibility of listening to the music with the FM synthesis module, which we don't have in the United States. You can still listen to this with FM music. There's ways to do that now, but at the time we didn't have that. And honestly, maybe it's nostalgia, I don't know, but I prefer the original regular music. I actually prefer that over the FM soundtrack that I've heard. I just think this has fantastic music for the Master System. The battles that you get into in this game, the animations that you see for the enemies, just the overall graphic style of the enemies, it's just fantastic. And the more you play the game, the more you will encounter enemies that just look and sound just really, really awesome. Of course, you probably want to fight them with an actual weapon instead of what I just did. Okay, we'll try this. We'll try fighting something that's not as difficult. Maybe we can run into something a little easier to kill right here. There we go. There we go. So yeah, it's an RPG. And there's other ways you can play Phantasy Star if you don't want to play it on original hardware. There's a really cool version of this for the Nintendo Switch that actually gives you like a full on-screen map and everything. Phantasy Star was re-released on the Sega Saturn, and there's a translation of that. It's a great series, and if you get a chance, play this. Play the sequels, obviously, for the Sega Genesis. Just a great game. And definitely a game you need to play and have if you're a fan of the Sega Master System and you want to play everything that this system has to offer. Yeah, I highly recommend Phantasy Star, absolutely. There's so many games that I could show and talk about. Like I said, I could just go on and on here. So I'm just going to wrap up here and tell you, yeah, expect more videos about Sega Master System games, because I absolutely love this console, and I love so many games on it. I only talked about a few of them right here. There's so many more that I could. So, do you like this console? Have you ever played the Master System? Is it one of your favorites? Do you hate the Master System? Like, what do you think about this console? Please let me know. You know, feel free to share your thoughts. Leave some comments, and let's talk a little bit about the Sega Master System, what it has to offer, what it's all about. I sure would appreciate hearing from you and some of your experiences with what for me is one of my all-time favorite video game systems. and definitely one of the best 8-bit systems that came out of the 80s. So anyway, thanks for watching this. I'll have more videos coming soon, and I will talk to you again later. Take care. Bye-bye.
The Sega Master System. The challenge will always be there.